Top 5, a show where we count things down from number 5 to number 1. And this week, we haven't done a musical episode in a while. Top 5 cover songs. Top 5 cover songs. And I've got a question for you guys. What is your definition of a cover song? Rodrigo, why don't we start with you?
I would define it as I think the most basic definition is just a song that is not performed by the original artist that I guess first performed it. But it gets really dicey because is anything that Carole King sings her own songs, are those covers? If she wasn't the original recording artist, right? So
if she wrote them for somebody else and they recorded it first, which version is the cover?
Right. Does a significant transformation of the song make it a cover? Because then Layla by Eric Clapton, right? It's basically he covered himself.
Right.
Because Slow Layla is very different. So it can be pretty tricky to actually define a cover.
All right. Matthew, what about you?
I think a cover is just a new performance of a song. And in the case of the Clapton Layla, it's the same. It doesn't even have to be a different performer. It's just, to me, a new performance. And there's one on my list that you can't find anywhere. It's not a recording that you can go out and find, but it's something that does happen. It happens in concert. You know it's there, and you're like, okay, that's really great. A cover song, I think, is just a different or a new performance.
All right. Well, then that's why I'm going to go with my number 5. If I'm not mistaken, this was part of the Go soundtrack, the movie Go, which was kind of a crazy movie. It is A Little Less Conversation. It's by Elvis, but it was remixed by Junkie XL. Oftentimes you will see this called A Little Less Conversation, Elvis versus Junkie XL. And the reason I have this on my list, number 1, it's a really cool take on a classic Elvis Presley song. Number 2, it is using Elvis's lyrics and Elvis's singing, but from a re-recording that was never released in the late 1960s. And then they got this, they sped it up. The tempo is much faster. They had to, basically speed shift or speed compress Elvis's songs to match up with their little scratching and beatboxing and the other things that are going on in there. Yes, those are my musical terms for this.
Wiki.
Yes, wickety wick. And A Little Less Conversation in this Junkie XL remix is, I know it's going to be sacrilege to a lot of you, is a much better performance than the B-side of A Little Less Conversation that was originally released back in the day.
Back in 68.
Yeah, and actually, when I first heard this song, you probably couldn't get me to listen to Elvis until this song was released. And I was like, ooh, maybe I want to go back and re-explore what's going on with Elvis and some of his quote-unquote classic songs.
And if you haven't seen Go, it's actually the same version that's in Ocean's 11.
Yeah. There you go.
I believe.
Now, the alternate, if this was going to be stricken from the record, there's an alternate Elvis Presley song that I would have gone with. And that's Suspicious Minds from Dwight Yoakam. And if you haven't listened to Dwight Yoakam sing Suspicious Minds, ooh boy, you're in for a treat right there. So my number 5, A Little Less Conversation. It's the Junkie XL remix, originally recorded by Elvis Presley. Rodrigo, what do you have for number 5?
My number 5 is one of the rare covers where I think pretty much everybody agrees that it's better than the original. You're always gonna run into people that tell you that it isn't, but it really is, and that's Jimi Hendrix's version of All Along the Watchtower.
Yep.
Oh yeah.
That's also my number 5.
Yep. So, because if you've heard the Dylan version, I think there's a few times where you listen to a song and then you listen to another version of the song and you're like, oh, this is what that song wanted to be, and somehow the actual recording artist didn't realize where the song was actually going somehow. It's like this happens sometimes when you listen to a demo. And then later on you listen to the song and you're like, oh, they figured it out somewhere in the process. And then same thing here where again, the Dylan version is just kind of there as far as I'm concerned. But Jimi Hendrix really transformed this song into something completely different and really epic, to the point where most people don't even realize that it's a cover.
Right. And the crazy thing is, Jimi Hendrix released his version of it 6 months after the Dylan version was out.
That was actually pretty common back in the day, because there was a point in time where the Monkees released a version of a song called D.W. Washburn at the same time that there were two other versions on the charts, one by the Drifters and one by somebody else. And it's just basically, hey, here's the Monkees version of that same song. Here's the Jimi Hendrix version of the Dylan thing. And All Along the Watchtower is fascinating because it falls into that whole what my mother's third husband, no, third and a half, she didn't actually marry him. What a guy my mother used to live with used to talk to me incessantly about when I was 13 or 14, the Electric Dylan controversy of 1965-66, where Bob Dylan had long been part of the folk music thing. And folk and rock in the mid-60s were never the twain shall meet. So when Dylan went electric, I want to say Dylan did a version of The Times They Are A-Changing, is where he started having electric guitars and electric in his background. Mm-hmm. It really made a huge difference. But I agree with Rodrigo. Again, it is my number 5 as well. All Along the Watchtower wanted to be electric. It wanted that haunting guitar melody. It wanted that moment that turned it into, well, I mean, here's the thing about it. Have you ever seen the movie Watchmen?
Yes.
Yeah. Who hasn't?
Or as I like to call it, the 23 unrelated music videos that come together that Zack Snyder wants us to call the movie Watchmen. And one of those unrelated music videos is the All Along the Watchtower reveal, where they're flying up to Ozymandias' base in Antarctica. And that song makes the scene, even though the movie itself is kind of that moment, and the music in that moment really makes it incredibly memorable, and it makes it work. And I agree that the Hendrix cover of that is the definitive version of the song, to the point where for years I didn't realize it was a cover. And when I heard the Dylan version, I was like, man, this is a terrible cover. And then of course somebody set me straight. And of course, I got actually back before it was actually. It was back in probably about 1989, 1990.
Yeah, back then it was just like, dude, let me fill you in.
It happens. Yeah. I think it happens a lot with music. I worked at with a lot of like teenagers and like 20-year-olds there for a while in my previous job. And they were always playing music through the overhead. And I definitely actually at a few people who would like listen to the song and they're like, this is like a really weird cover of that Counting Crows and song about a big yellow taxi. And I'm like, no, this is the original Big Yellow Taxi. Yeah, no, the other one's a cover.
That's how it works. Well, music is very personal, and the point where you enter, your point can mess up your space and time, because in my brain, in my head, the Monkees are an 80s band and will always be an 80s band. And every once in a while, I'll be listening to the music and I'll be like, and then there's a reference to the Beatles, or there will be something that really ties something down to the thing that got me was President Johnson. There's a joke that Mickey makes on one track about President Johnson. And I'm like, man, that joke must be 20 years old No, the song was written in 1968. I didn't hear it till 1986. But man, All Along the Watchtower, just that.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Boom, boom.
Love that. Love that all.
Awesome. Well, let us do our number 4s now. And if you're going to make a song, if you're going to make a song list, Miley Cyrus is bound to pop up. Now, I know a lot of people have problems with Miley Cyrus, but the girl can sing. And she's had some pretty good hits, including Wrecking Ball, which is really weird because I've played it one time in the car with the boys, the Miley Cyrus's version. And instantly they were like, can we hear that again? And by the second time, the youngest, who rarely sings and hates singing, is trying to sing along with the song.
That sounds adorable.
Yes.
It does.
Also, Party in the USA, he does that too.
Sure.
But Wrecking Ball is a really interesting song, especially when you can get a mandolin, a ukulele, a fiddle, a banjo to cover it. And so if you've never heard the Beef Seeds cover Wrecking Ball, it's a little bit faster pace. The girl who is the singer on it is fantastic. And it just has this really country vibe to it that I really like. It's a bluegrass version of Wrecking Ball. And it is really good. And I actually prefer it to the Miley Cyrus version, even though I think Miley does fine with that. But if you ever get a chance to check out the Beef Seeds Wrecking Ball, it's one of those moments where you're like, oh, I didn't know you could do that to a song like that. And it came out really good and is on my number 4 for my top 5 cover songs.
Nice.
Yeah. Rodrigo, what is your number 4?
My number 4 is a song that you probably can't find a recording of, although maybe the
You've never heard it. It's pretty obscure.
Yeah, it's from Canada.
It kind of is. It's because it's pretty hipstery because it's from the AV Club's AV Undercover series, where they put out a bunch of songs and then they bring in super hip, cool bands to come cover them. So my number 4 is Punch Brothers covering Reptilia by the Strokes. I wouldn't go as far as to say, like with All Along the Watchtower, that this song is better than the Strokes version. I love the Strokes version, but they take all the instrumentation and make it basically folk instrumentation. So there's like
they have like a banjo, right?
Yep, there's like a banjo and like a mandolin and just an acoustic guitar, but they still really rock out with it. So it's always fun. You know, you have this like really intense minor key upbeat song, and then just to have it transported, you know, like 80 years into the past and played by an old-timey band, alternately just transported a few miles north, I think, into Portland and played by a band there. It really changes the song, but not to the point where it's unrecognizable or to the point where it's a big difference. I think a lot of the time with covers, it's like if you like the song a lot to begin with, a very close cover will be kind of what you're looking for. If you were kind of lukewarm on the song, a cover that transforms the song is kind of what you end up liking.
Cool.
So, yeah, my number 4, Reptilia by the Punch Brothers.
Excellent. Matthew, what is your number 4?
My number 4 is the song that I covertly or inadvertently or indirectly referenced just a few minutes ago when we were talking about the nature of a cover and what it actually is. And it's fascinating to me because in 1990, and this is true, and Otter Disaster will tell you this, and Carl, if you're listening, you can back us up on this. In 1990, I owned 2 things that everybody knew that I owned. One was a huge piece of crap Dodge, and that piece of crap Dodge had a stereo, and in that stereo was always Pearl Jam's 10, like over and over and over. It's a great album. I love it. It cycles well. It goes from the beginning to the end, and then you come back around and everything's fine. And the reason that people know this is I listened to that album and specifically Pearl Jam incessantly. So when I discovered that one of the major influences that Pearl Jam claims and loves is The Who, another band that I really love, I was like, oh, that's kind of neat. And I can kind of see what it is. But if you've ever heard a song by The Who called, and I say Baba O'Reilly, I've heard people say Baba O'Reilly.
Yeah, Baba O'Reilly.
Baba O'Reilly, which in the original version starts with this long and really intricate synthesizer part that goes boodly 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 boodly. Pearl Jam does a cover regularly in concert of Baba O'Reilly. And Pearl Jam is not a synthesizer band. They're a grungy garage rock band with 2 guitars and a bass and a drummer. So the lead guitarist plays that weird, intricate synth part on his guitar. And it is fascinating. My number 4 is Pearl Jam's cover seen in concert of Baba O'Riley. Again, not a better version of the song, but a completely different version. And what it really does is it kind of reminds you of, I think, the thumbprint or the fingerprints of the creators. It's like in comics, we see this all the time. John Byrne is drawing Fantastic Four, and this is how the Fantastic Four looks. John Byrne now left. Walt Simonson is drawing Fantastic Four, the same characters, but a totally different vibe, a totally different take. Clearly the same Reed, Sue, Ben, and Johnny. It's clearly the same Baba O'Riley, but it's also a Pearl Jam song, and it's done in Pearl Jam style, and it's done with Eddie Vedder doing his, I had a friend who used to make fun of me in college who said that Eddie Vedder sings like sheep. Everything's broken. It's true, but everybody in the 90s sang like that. This cover, though, is a fascinating sort of look at what might have been if Pearl Jam existed in the 60s, or if The Who was active during the grunge phase of the 1990s. And I really love that sort of thing, and that's why my number 4, Baba O'Riley by Pearl Jam. Go check it out. It's out there somewhere in the universe.
Yep. It's probably on YouTube.
I think that's the only place you can get it. I don't know that it's ever been recorded and put on an album or anything.
My number 3, again, if you're going to do cover songs and you don't have the Beatles or a Beatles song on your list, is really odd because they've done so much and so many people have covered the Beatles and done a much better job than the original. When we talk about With a Little Help from My Friends, when the Beatles sing it, it's fine. It's a nice little song. It does what it needs to do. It makes you feel fine. But when Joe Cocker sings it, holy crap, you realize suddenly that the only thing keeping Joe Cocker up are his friends and probably, a bottle of Jack Daniels or whatever that he's...
Probably some heroin. And you
Yes,
realize
that
that you love Winnie Cooper.
Yeah, and that's where I first heard Joe Cocker's version was on... what was the name?
The Wonder Years.
The Wonder Years.
The Wonder Years, yeah.
Yeah. And you go and track this down and you listen to the full version of it. And I think there's a couple versions. There's a one that is much more extended than like the 3-minute cut that you hear on Wonder Years. But it's really good. And if you've ever watched, and again on YouTube, watch Joe Cocker sing this on stage when he starts gesticulating all over the place, you just realize this man is like totally into this song and loves it so much. And it is really good. And it's a lot livelier. I think it hits you a lot deeper than the Beatles song did. But Joe Cocker belts it out with A Little Help from My Friends. That is my number 3.
There's a point in that song where the Beatles sang, yeah, and Joe Cocker sings, from like, you're afraid he's to discorporate on stage. It's freaky.
Yeah. Rodrigo, what is your number 3?
My number 3 is by a performer named Anja Marina. And this is her cover of Whatever You Like by T.I. It is a really cool, really smooth cover. And I think kind of what's important about it is that a lot of the time you have like white performers covering rappers. There's kind of this like little novelty thing about it. And it doesn't always feel genuine. Kind of like it's like, oh, listen to these like, folksy boys or country boys or just any group of boys covering this rap song. Ha ha. This really doesn't feel that way, right? It's not the novelty of it. It's I think an honest cover of it. It kind of does bring up the decadence that the song is going for. It brings up the sexiness that the song is going for. So I enjoy it, and it's something that unlike some other covers of rap songs that get turned into like sort of melodic songs. this is one that I actually listen to with some frequency and not just, every once in a while to crack up at it.
All right, Matthew, what is your number 3?
My number 3 is a classic of modern musical literature. And it comes from a place of weirdly recursive creativity because it comes from a movie which is based on another movie. It's a movie that says, hey, what if Akira Kurosawa, but also space? And so the movie Star Wars comes out and it's like, do, and everyone is transformed. Steven was, I was, eventually Rodrigo was. I think he loved the prequels more because, well, you're younger. But there's a point where that John Williams theme comes up, and everybody knows that to the point where you really can transform it. The way Nick the Lounge Singer did in 1977 on Saturday Night Live, when he covered Star Wars in the lounge and gave it lyrics, which I think really enhanced the experience. Star Wars, nothing but Star Wars. And Bill Murray just imbues Nick the Lounge Singer with this love of music and life and the universe to where you kind of enjoy that lounge singer take on the song as much as the original John Williams instrumentation, if you're a weirdo like me. And so any list of the greatest cover songs of all time has to include Nick somewhere along the line. And that's why my number 3 is Star Wars by Bill Murray as Nick the Lounge Singer.
I would have to, not doing my research on this, I would have to go back. I wonder if that is not in response to the popularity of the disco Star Wars song that came out.
It's entirely possible.
Right after Star Wars was released. And if you've never heard the disco version of Star Wars, if you have Sirius XM, the Disney Channel, the kids' Disney radio channel, will play that song probably about once a week.
It is good too, though, and that's the thing about it is it's the song partly that makes it work, just the strength of that composition. But yeah, I'm telling you, that disco version is nothing compared to one man with one piano and one microphone and one ridiculous mustache.
We are on to our number 2s. And I was surprised. I mean, if we include the Dwight Yoakam or not include the Dwight Yoakam, there's a surprising number of country bluegrass songs on my cover list. And I'm not someone who really goes out of my way to listen to country or bluegrass music. But again, when you have a song done by one performer who has a style and an expectation from him, let's say someone like Snoop Dogg, right? And then you take that song and you give it to a bunch of Tennessee, and I don't know if they're from Tennessee, but if you give it to a Tennessee country bluegrass group, maybe they're from Kentucky, you can use the exact same lyrics, but you can change that song, and the Gourds can take Gin and Juice, and I would say it'd be very close, but their version of Gin and Juice may be as well known, if not better known, than Snoop's version of that song. The only reason I say that is because when that album came out, I forget when it came out, like 2006, something like that. The album version is really good. It's about 7 minutes long. But they were requested to play it so much and so often that in 2010, they had to retire the song, and they retired it with a 14-minute version of their version of the song. And if you want a 14-minute version of Gin and Juice, go check out the Gourds Gin and Juice Encore. It's on YouTube. It's really good. I mean, I don't know what it is. Again, I think it's the combination of fiddle and mandolin and banjo that combines to create this very unique sound while you're talking about all the things that you're doing in California with some alcohol and drugs and some women's. Probably not something you should have your kids listen to.
No,
but
there's too much drama in the LBC for kids, my friends.
Well, I don't know if it's the drama so much as it is who's in the living room and my pocket full of things, and my homeboys have them too, that may bring up some questions. Yeah. But my number 2, Gin and Juice by the Gourds. Go check it out. Really a fantastic cover of a Snoop Dogg song.
I want to say they did their cover like right after he did in 95.
Yeah, and it, like I said, they were requested. That is a song that there's always requested. And then, like I said, in 2010, they're like, look, this is the last time we're going to play this song.
Come on, guys.
You guys better get out your recorders now. And they blew it out for like a 14.5-minute version of it. It is so cool. It is. It'll definitely make your morning, especially if you have a relatively average commute. So there you go. Rodrigo, what do you have for your number 2?
My number 2 is a classic.
Okay.
It's a song that has been covered a lot, but I think that this is the best cover of it. So the original song, Heard It Through the Grapevine by Gladys Knight and the Pips. What do you guys have a best cover in mind for it?
I would say the California Raisins.
Isley Brothers.
Yep, those are good, but I think the best cover by far was the one that came out immediately after it, which is Smokey Robinson and the Miracles.
Ooh, that's a good.
Probably the most famous version of it is the Marvin Gaye version.
Yeah.
I think if you listen to the radio, most of the time that's the one that you're gonna hear.
Yeah.
If you listen to the oldies station or whatever, but most covers of I Heard It Through the Grapevine are a cover of the Smokey Robinson version, because the Gladys Knight version is a lot faster and it's different. You know, it's like I heard it through the grapevine, just about, right? The Smokey Robinson version is the one that like stretches that out into like that sort of like sauntering, cool, like thing that the Marvin Gaye version does, and that most other covers of the song do. So actually, most covers of I Heard It Through the Grapevine are actually covers of the Smokey Robinson version of a cover of a Gladys Knight song. So I think it really, again, this is what that song wanted to be. And although other artists may have popularized it a lot more, because I think also the Marvin Gaye version is like just was huge, like just made him a huge amount of money. I think the Smokey Robinson version is really the moment that song actually became what the song should have been.
Very cool. Matthew, your number 2.
My number 2 is a song that's very personal and very important to me. It's a song that I actually was first introduced to and really started investigating probably in about 1988, 1989. And I spent a lot of time talking about this song and the original performer with a friend who just recently passed away like a couple of weeks ago. We used to work together at a radio station. And Cameron and I used to talk all the time about the lyrics of this particular song. And in kind of a weird progression, it occurred to me 2 things. One, at the time, I didn't know it was a cover, but I did know that there's a longer version than the version you mostly hear on the radio. And if you listen to the song correctly, and you listen to the long version at the end, there's a reprise of all the lyrics, including a verse that does not appear in Manfred Mann's version of Blinded by the Light. And this always kind of puzzled me, that the reprise version at the end had a whole thing about young Scott with a slingshot finally found the tender spot and throws his lover in the sand. So it just kind of in the back of my mind, that little detective thing in the back of my mind was tearing it apart. And finally one day, and this wasn't that long ago, I'm embarrassed to say, I was sitting and I was listening and I heard something coming out of a radio speaker. And I'm like, these lyrics sound familiar, but that doesn't sound like Manfred Mann. That sounds like Bruce Springsteen. And it was Bruce Springsteen singing the original version of Blinded by the Light from 1973, which is why that whole verse is in the reprise, but not in the Manfred Mann version. And if you listen to the original version, it's Bruce Springsteen, kind of like the Dylan version of Watchtower. It's very much a straightforward folky song. And the thing about it is it's really kind of just a tongue twister. in the original version. Madman drummers, bummers, and Indians in the summer with a teenage diplomat. So when the Manfred Mann version comes out, first of all, it does not say revved up like a douche. It's deuce, D-E-U-C-E, which I believe refers to a deuce coupe. But more importantly...
You don't know what I got.
Yeah, exactly. It's better. I will come out and I will say that Blinded by the Light by Manfred Mann is better than the Springsteen version. But it's so different. It's practically a different song. And it has the most incredible, weird, psychedelic, almost 60s thing, which is weird because it came out in 1977 or 78, in the middle, where the long version just goes nuts, and there's a guy going boodly, 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 boodly for like 27 and a half minutes. But I will tell you two things. If you have to listen to it by Springsteen, you're still good. Much like a pizza, the worst Blinded by the Light is still great. But it goes Springsteen, radio edit, extended long cut with the 15-minute psychedelic kind of thing in the middle that feels like a whole Yes album. And then you get to the end and you have to explain to your friends that it's not a douche. It's just stop saying douche because you can't say douche on the radio. But in any case, my number two, Manfred Mann's cover of Blinded by the Light by Bruce Springsteen is a wonderful song. And it's one of the songs that my kid loves. I gave her a bunch of my music on an MP3 player, and my kid loves that song. So someday I'm going to play her the other version and ruin her entire universe forever.
All right, we are up to our number ones. And in 1995, I don't think the English group Pulp would have thought that their song would have been covered as famously as it has. Ben Folds 5 produced this cover version in 2004. And if I'm not mistaken, I think the lead singer of Pulp is the person that accompanies this particular person in the cover of the Common People song.
Jarvis Cocker is the lead singer of Pulp.
Yeah, I think that's who is accompanying this person in the cover. But the song is about a guy, and it's based on a real encounter that Jarvis had where he ran into a rich girl who was wanting to slum it and be like common people, which is where this song came from. And the original is fine. It's a fine song. It's good. But we need to talk about William Shatner. Now, William Shatner for years has been criticized and mocked, sometimes rightfully so, for some of his songs. But I think if you listen to Rocket Man, I mean, that's a really good cover.
He's the only person who actually makes those lyrics comprehensible, is probably the word I'm looking for.
But in his album Has Been, which is a collection of cover songs by William Shatner. But, William Shakespeare has a way of, letting words come out, and Bill Shatner also has a way of letting words come out.
Yeah. Slowly and in bursts.
Yes. And if you ever listen to his version of Common People, it is so cool. In fact, the whole album is really cool. It's also kind of in hindsight, maybe a little bit sad because I think this album came out after he lost his wife. And so there's a little bit of, what has my life become, kind of specter haunting the back of this album as you're listening through all the tracks. But the first song on the track, I believe, is Common People, or on the album is Common People. And it is just so good. It is so good that our friend Brian Ibbett, who does the song, the show Coverville, where he plays nothing but cover songs, has had to ban the song because people kept requesting it nonstop. Where basically once a month he'd be like, all right, here's William Shatner and Common People, blah, blah, blah. And then finally, this is like maybe 7 years ago, he's like, nope, not going to play it anymore. It's on the Coverville Hall of Fame, and you'll never hear it on the show again. But the William Shatner cover, Common People cover, is really good. And if you haven't heard it, which I'm going to bet most of you have, but if you haven't, take a moment and go check it out. I think it will change your idea on cover songs, and maybe just give you a little bit more respect for William Shatner. But that is
his cover of Space Oddity is also
that one is also really good too. Yeah. But man, I think Common People blow the other two out of the water of his popular songs. And that's why it's my number one. Rodrigo, what is your number one?
My number one is another classic and possibly a song that has been covered even more than I heard it through the grapevine, which is A Feat. The original is by a Mexican artist named Alberto Dominguez, but it has been covered by American artists as well, Nat King Cole, Glenn Miller Band. Some of my favorite bands have covered. Café Tacuba has a version, but I think the best version of Porphyria is the Lupita Palomera version.
Mm.
It is haunting. It is beautiful. Anytime that you have like a girl singing what is clearly was meant to be a boy song about a girl, you kind of get into this thing where it's like, am I supposed to pretend this is a boy singing, or is it like, is that okay? Is it okay that they're just two girls that are into each other? Obviously now that's fine. Back when this song was first recorded by Lupita Palomera, maybe not so much. But yeah, this is a song that has a huge hit. It's basically a jazz standard now. You hear bands play this song all the time. It is kind of became an international hit and is now kind of like in this like general lexicon of songs like String of Pearls or whatever, or Little Brown Jug. And you just kind of hear around every once in a while. You'll be listening to music and they'll play Porphyria. But out of all that stuff, out of all those versions, I think the only version that I've heard that ever made me really feel the kind of the level of sorrow that I think and more importantly, feeling sorry for yourself that the song calls for is the Palomera version.
Wow.
All right, Matthew, you are finishing us out with your number one. What's on that list?
Well, fortunately, I'm glad this time I went last, because I am occasionally prone to hyperbole. People who know me will say that occasionally I do kind of go a little over the top. I'm not saying that there are hundreds of people that I refer to as geniuses or anything, but I speak to you in plain language, right down to earth, when I tell you that my number one is a cover of the greatest song of them all. This is, I think, a strong contender for the greatest song in the world in the history of music. And I'm not being, goofy and weird. I'm not saying this in a Jack Black sort of way. I'm literally telling you that Jerry Rafferty's Baker Street, off of his album City to City from 1978, is a perfect musical experience. It is beautiful. And there's a point in the song where this saxophone riff kicks in, and the saxophone riff is haunting and beautiful and uplifting and terrifying all at the same time. And so I say to myself, this is a perfect song. No one should ever cover this. And if you do, you're a terrible human being. And that's where Dave Grohl comes in. Dave Grohl, formerly of Nirvana, is now with a band called, well, I don't know about now. Who knows what time it is now. In the future, he could be with another band. Future people, in the year 3017, welcome this new band. We're going to call them Ted. But right now, he's with the Foo Fighters, who did a cover of Jerry Rafferty's Baker Street that did three things exactly right. One, it didn't change the song to fit their style, but they definitely did it as a Foo Fighters song. Two, they kept the entirety of that saxophone riff, but they gave it to a guitar player, much like the Pearl Jam cover of The Who, where all of a sudden a new instrument is doing that same musical progression, and it's like a whole new world. And three, and I think this is most important, they changed one word in the lyrics to modernize it. They changed the word booze in the line, lay off the booze and the one night stands, to crack. And I said to myself, Do we hate this? And myself said no, because right there, it's almost as though they admitted, we know that we are on this dangerous ground with a song that is really wonderful, and we know that we're making big changes to it. But here's a little bit of a fillip, a little stick out the tongue to say that we're not taking ourselves too seriously, but we are taking this song seriously. And the original song has some elements of bathos and parody to it. So it really works perfectly for me. And there's just that 8-bar riff that was a saxophone that's now a guitar. And you're just like, yep, perfect, wonderful, good. It's a rare example of a cover that I love just as much as the original song. And I have both on my MP3 player at all times in case, the urge strikes. Because really, when you're old like I am, sometimes you have to have different decades of the same song just to remember how old you were when you loved it the first time. And that's why my number one is the Foo Fighter cover of the greatest song in the world, Baker Street.
All right, there you go. I'm kind of a little disappointed in you, Matthew. When we were talking about this last week, I could have swore you said you were going to put Johnny Cash's Hurt on there.
I said
but that's
Johnny
okay.
Cash's Hurt would be great.
That's okay, because you know what? We're going to put a part 1 on this. And and sometime in the future, we're going to do another top 5.
We're going to do all Johnny Cash covers.
Yes, we'll do all Johnny Cash covers. We'll come back at another point in time, and we'll share even more of our favorite cover songs.
But my number one will still be Baker Street.
But in the meantime, ladies and gentlemen, head over to Majorspoilers.com. In the comments section for this episode, share your top 5 cover songs. What are they? Do you got some Ike and Tina on your list? Do you have some Johnny Cash on your list? Let us know in the comments section. We will love to read your list, as does everyone else. And we'll probably go track down some of those songs because everybody loves a list. And we will talk with you next time.
This podcast is copyright 2018 by Major Spoilers Entertainment, LLC.